Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Clerk in the Nightmare Department. I've had some strange occurrences in my life I have not been able to fully explain away with rationality and reason. I tell myself that it's just because I didn't have all of the data needed to explain it to myself. That there were a series of coincidences that added together to trick my mind into seeing, hearing, feeling something other than what was actually happening. And this is likely the actual answer. But I often wonder what if my gut feeling was right. I've worn many hats since becoming an adult. I've been a photo clerk for a very widespread American pharmacy convenience store chain. I worked as a tech and supervisor in 2 cases in a handful of arcades, both independent and corporate-owned chains. I've done security, both armed and unarmed, in various locations, and I've been a freelance PC repair guy, going to people's home mostly. In almost every single one of these jobs, something that spooked me has happened. And I'm here to share some of these stories. First names besides my own will not be changed, but last names will if they come up. The names of specific businesses, especially those belonging to big chains, will be left out, though I'm sure most Americans, especially those in Florida, will know some of them. Some of them will just be odd. A couple of them might be creepy. With the introductions aside, I give you my first real job out of high school, photo clerk. I got the job as a temp or seasonal gig right around Thanksgiving of 2009. I had no experience in the workplace and had dropped out of school a year prior due to a series of stupid and unfortunate events with my school and some family illness. After my family situation settled down, I started looking for work. The manager who hired me appreciated my strong family-oriented mind and my eagerness to work any shift, any position. I was trained the day after my interview for the photo clerk position, which entailed processing traditional and digital photos, as well as some register work when they got backed up, which was often considering the time of year it was. The first few weeks went by easily enough, though I did have one issue where I exposed an entire roll of film on accident. Luckily enough, it was a trainer refresher roll and not a customer's photo. About a month in, though, I had a strange situation pop up. When we took a customer's photo, we would ask for a name, a phone number, and if they would be picking the pictures up later that day or at another time. All rolls of film were placed in a yellow cardstock envelope with a sticker showing the details, above mentioned how many duplicates they wanted, etc. We'd process the film, print the pictures, and pop them back in the same envelopes, then stick them in the alphabetically sorted bins for pickup. I had come in to start a closing shift when I was told by the older woman I was taking over for that there were 4 orders she didn't get to, all by the same guy. Told me he seemed like a weirdo, and the first 2 orders she had done for him were all blank rolls. She had called him and questioned if he had left the film where it would have been damaged, and told him the results of the first 2 rolls. He insisted he wanted them all processed and would pay even for the fucked up ones. So when my coworker left, I took over. Just like the first 2 rolls. The next 2 seemed to be totally blank. They were just solid black shots, as if the guy had covered the lens and just kept snapping pictures. But I figured the dude told her he wanted them all done. Who was my $7.25 an hour dropout asked to question it? Things got weird with the 3rd roll. They were black still, but a small item could just barely be seen in the background. By the end of that set, you could just see what looked like a hairless dog of some sort laying on the ground. The 4th roll was much the same, just getting closer to the dog, which looked off. Something didn't look right about it the closer you got. About halfway through that set, you could just make out the head of the thing, and it was all wrong. Crooked, snarled, somewhat porcine, and bloody. It looked like some sick artist decided to cobble together a pig-dog thing for some project. I thought it was probably some artsy hipster's college art project and let them finish up. The last shot was a pretty close-up view of the thing, all beaten and bloody. I kind of wanted to gag. So I called the closing manager over when it was done and explained what my coworker had told me about the dude and the first 2 rolls of film, and I explained the 4 I did, as well as showed him the picture. He had a similar sort of reaction, and said even though whatever it was looked abused, because it didn't look like any animal he had ever seen, there was nothing illegal about the content. We couldn't really do anything about it. Told me to package up the pictures for pickup as normal. I was working the next night when the guy came to pick them up. Dude did seem to meet the description I had thought the night before. He was in his mid to late 20s, looked like he stumbled out of a skinny puppy show, smelled like Jerome black clove cigarettes, and a brooding personality. When I handed over the pictures as he was paying, I asked what the deal with the animal in the picture was, and that I wondered if it was an art project or something. Dude just looks at me with a cocky little smirk and says, "Just something we found out in the glades," and didn't say anything else, not another word, just taking his pictures and his change and exiting the store. I had told the manager about it and he just shrugged at me, mentioning something about goth punk idiots before asking me to go get the carts outside. Doing as I was asked, I went out and started rounding up the carts, noticing the wannabe Trent Reznor clone in the driver's seat of a beat-up old 95 Chevy Astro van. The tint on the side window was all bubbled and torn in a few places, and as the guy lit one of his cigarettes, I saw, just for an instant through the fucked-up tint, something that looked a bit like a dog. After the events of my first job, I was without a job again for a while. I had started taking some classes at a local trade school and my family situation was pretty good, so I didn't need to work. Family basically told me to focus on school and not to worry about a job until I was done. So some time passed. Eventually I finished the classes I was taking, primary one being in casino gaming repair, and got a job as a tech in the arcade industry with the info and skills I had picked up. The arcade I worked at had been a bit of a local landmark here in the past, and even had tourists from all over, mostly from Canada, Germany, and Eastern Europe, due to the large all-wooden roller coaster we had. We offered go-karts, kiddie rides, rock climbing, laser tag, and one of the bigger arcade floors in the area. And just about the time I started working there, a sports bar area was added. Recently, the place closed down, and if he hasn't been demolished, it's slated to be, making room for new shopping center or condos, I've heard. That's the nature of South Florida. If it ain't being used, it's being snatched up to make room to stuff more people and businesses in. Yay, tourism dollars. I was hired as a tech, but due to being hired on for the swing shift and most of the weekend, I was often used as an attraction or arcade attendant, depending on the staff needs and customer count. I'd often start the day working on repairs, only to be moved to those duties towards the middle of my shift. I also happened to be one of the only males closing most weekdays, other than the night manager and kitchen guys. That'll set the stage for the first of these stories. It wasn't long after I had started working there that I had been asked by the night manager to cover the laser tag room for the rest of my shift. It was a slow day in the middle of the week, during the school year, and normally we wouldn't have many, if any, customers at that time. But there was a birthday party of about 10 teenagers coming in last minute, so I packed up my tools and closed up the steering assembly on the initial D I was repairing. Those card readers like to fuck up a lot, it seemed, and headed into the laser tag room. The area was set up with a slender but relatively long staging area that had the vest and guns, the computer that controlled everything, instruction, video, and music controls. There was a flimsy carpet-covered bit of drywall with 2 doors, one on each end for entry and exit. On the other side of that wall was a pretty large room, maybe the size of a standard movie theater, with all sorts of thick plastic walls, strobe lights mounted to the walls, as well as hung down from the rafters on poles and chains. Every hour we were supposed to go in, close the door to the rest of the arcade, and lock it so no one comes in and dicks around. Do a quick visual sweep of the area, make sure there was nothing broken, no trash or other items laying around, and sweep up if needed. Then open back up. I was doing the sweep, starting from the entry door, working my way up and down the lanes in a bottom to bottom style to get to the exit door. Everything was cool the first few lanes, just listening to my music in one ear, listening out for the radio with the other. Until maybe about 3/4 of my sweep was done, I started feeling like I was being watched, and could have sworn I saw something move around one of the dividers. I wasn't creeped at first. I figured some parent lost track of their brat, and they were running around in the laser tag room because they thought it was cool. So I called out, "Hey kid, no one's allowed in here right now. Laser tag is closed for another 5 to 10 minutes. Don't make me get your parents." No response. I didn't hear footsteps, didn't hear breathing, didn't see anything else, so I figured, all right, kid is either hiding or left. So I made my way back to the exit after finishing my sweep and realized something. When I entered the control room, as I like to call it, the door to the rest of the arcade was still closed and locked. The only ones that had keys to that room that night were the night manager and myself. I was pretty spooked for a bit, but played it off on the strobe lights and the fact that some of the barrier bits had reflective plastic pieces on them. I chalked it up to that, and the fact I hadn't been getting much sleep. Disposable income and a new Xbox 360 didn't leave me a lot of sleep time. What can I say? I let the party in when they got there. They did laser tag until close, about 3 hours worth of play. Surprisingly enough, they weren't total shitheads like most of the teens we got, and weren't rowdy or overly obnoxious, which I was thankful for. The birthday girl even slid me a tip for letting them stay longer than their passes were good for. What was 30 extra minutes when we were about to close anyway? And they got out of there, leaving me to do just a final sweep of the place before shutting down and closing up. I did the same deal as my first time around. And again, when I got to about 3/4 done, I saw the same movement out of the corner of my eye and felt like I was being watched. I grabbed my flashlight out of my pocket and shone it around, looking for any stray kids or anything else, making a note to check for reflective bits. Nothing. Any of it. None of the shiny plastic bits in eyesight, no kids in the room, nothing. Needless to say, I was spooked. I couldn't blame it on the strobe lights this time either, since I had shut them off before coming in. I kept thinking that there had to be a rational excuse for it, but also that I also valued sex and gaming too much to get my ass killed for $8.50 an hour. I booked it out of there, shut the doors leading to the laser arena area, just shut everything off by the power switch, and got out to the arcade floor to help close the rest of the building down. A few days later, we had another slow day, and after I got my daily punch list done, I went to the laser tag room to chat with one of the other employees, a short, somewhat chubby blonde girl I'll call A. She was in there, charging her phone via the computer, with the doors to the laser tag area closed tight and the normal lighting on in the control room, which were usually off in favor for the black lights. I started making the usual small talk. "Man, it's pretty dead in here tonight," talking about TV, etc. Maybe 20 minutes passed and she asked me, "So, you closed up in here by yourself the other night?" And I answered, "Yeah, what about it?" I didn't want to look like some pussy in front of a cute girl. She just shook her head a bit and starts to tell me about how spooked she gets in there, even with the lights on and another person with her. How she refuses to close it by herself. The creepy feelings she has, the things she's seen and heard. Considering I hadn't said a single thing about my experience to anyone, I was getting a for spooky 5 me levels here, but I played it off, telling her some of the stuff I had read up on when I got home from my experience about human psychology and how the dark brings our evolutionary instincts out the most. She thanked me for trying, but said that probably wouldn't help her not feel creeped out in there. Flash forward about a month, and we have this deal going where if you bought one round, you got a round free. They had underestimated the turnout, and had been understaffed as a result. When the girl in laser tag that night, not A this time, was on a break, I had to cover her. There was a bit of lull in people as many of them left due to a bad storm rolling in, but about 10 minutes into me getting situated in there, this couple and their friend come in. Two big black dudes, looked like extras in a rap video, tattoos all over. One of them even had facial tattoos. The girl clinging to one of them looked like a coked-up hooker from a bad area. They were polite enough, just not too bright or cleanly looking. I got them set up. They went in and started playing, just the three of them. Their rounds end, and they all three come out together. The chick tells me I should go get the little girl that's in there. She looks too young to be in there by herself, and didn't have a vest on. I told her they were the only ones that were in there, and she looked kind of worried. The dude with the facial tattoo tells me, "No, really, there's some kid in there, boss. Little white girl. Maybe 3 or 4. I'm about to piss myself there, but thank them for letting me know, and they get out of there. I figured one of 3 things is happening here. Either 1, they were on drugs. 2, there was a girl in there who had somehow gotten in without me noticing. 3, well, let's just say I kept reminding myself I'm an atheist and skeptic. I don't believe in this shit. So I'm opting that it was 2 or 3 and go in, this time turning on the normal lights, thanks to A showing me where the switches for them were. I started by just saying, "Laser tag is closing for 10 minutes while we do the hourly cleanup and safety checks. If there is anyone here, you have to exit the arena until we're done." Of course, not a single damn response. I let out a sigh and started sweeping the room. Absolutely nothing, other than that sense I'm being watched. All the while I'm thinking, man, evolution, tone that shit down all right. We're not being stalked by panthers and shit anymore. We don't need to see every little thing around. I swept the arena twice, because if there was a little kid lost in there, I didn't want to be responsible. Again, nothing. I said fuck it and left. The girl running the room before I got there was returning from break in a minute or 2. I let her deal with it. Again, we fast forward a few weeks. It's a Friday night, which is surprisingly not a busy night there. There's a crowd from about 4 p.m., the time middle schools in the county get out, until about 8 p.m., and we're open until midnight. We got a lot of cleaning and repair done on Friday nights. By this time, I was working as both a tech during off hours and a supervisor during the rest of my time there. I wasn't getting paid anymore, but I did get the benefit of doing just about whatever I wanted, when I wanted. That's not to say I got complacent, but I did fit in a lot more socialization. I'd come around and help the attendants with their cleaning, shooting the shit while we did. I'd talk about games with the guys, cooking and TV with the more traditional girls, flirted around, just tried to have some fun while doing the daily grind. A lot of the staff appreciated that, being at your own station alone, especially on the open arcade floor where you couldn't have your phone out. It got really boring. So I just finished helping one of our newer guys clean the monitors on a bank of games while talking about our Warcraft addictions, and he went off to do some more cleaning in another section. I made my way over to the laser tag room where A was. She would always send calls for repairs when she was in there alone, especially on dead days. We were just talking about random stuff, how she was thinking about moving, about my girlfriend at the time, and how her being away for school was putting a strain on things. Just the usual life crap. We were there what had to be a good hour when some kids came up. They tried to use their game cards and were denied. They only had arcade credit on it. As they were walking away all dejected, I told them I'd just let them in for a round or 2 if they kept it between us. My manager honestly didn't care, especially on slow nights, and I remembered what it was like to be disappointed as a kid. They got all happy and suited up. A and I continued to talk as I gave them 3 rounds. When they finished up, they thanked us and left. A was all telling me how nice it was that I let them, and I was playing up the modest good guy routine. Got a call on the radio for a customer service related issue, so I had to head out. And I'd gotten distracted with other guys for the rest of the night, helping out and again shooting the shit. At close, I told A I would get laser tagged since I knew she was straight terrified of the place. I felt uneasy in it too, but there hadn't been any other incidents or big thugged out looking guys reporting little girls in there, so I didn't have an issue doing it. Just as I got the computers shut down and went to do the floor sweep, one of the kids I let in earlier comes up saying he lost his wallet and the last time he had seen it was coming in to laser tag. I asked him if he can look for it, and I told him I'm just about to go in and that I'll turn on the light. He can come back and look with me. We get in and the kid instantly goes off for one direction. I decided I'd go to the other, get more ground covered and get him out of there faster. I did a sweep of the floor, found nothing, and a few seconds later, I heard the door close. Figured the kid had found his wallet and in a rush to leave closed the door behind him. So I just called out, "Hey kid, you still in here?" To make sure. I didn't get a response. So I head to the control room and flicked off the lights, head to the turnstile leading into the room where the door inside is, and go to close it. Suddenly, I hear loud footsteps, heavy breath, and see something straight up charging me. I stumble back and grope for the light. It's the kid. He's got his wallet in his hand and looked like he's about to cry. I apologized profusely for shutting the light off on him and asked why he didn't answer when I asked if he was still in there. He tells me he didn't hear anything and that the dark didn't scare him, but asked why I let the little girl in there too, and why was she running all around and looking at him, that she was scary and freaking him out. At this point, I grabbed the kid by his shoulder, escorted him out, and didn't bother shutting the rest of the room down for the night. A saw me bringing him out and the look on my face, and then she asked me what was wrong. So I took her to the side and told her everything the kid told me, the shit the thugged out looking people told me previously, and the shit I had experienced. She looked me dead in the eye and asked if I was fucking with her. Even punched me and said not to fuck around about stuff like that. I swore to her I was being 100% serious. She told me she was never doing laser tag again, and in the entire time I worked there, at least on shifts we both worked together, I never saw her work it. The new guy I mentioned previously, the one I would talk World of Warcraft with, well, we'll call him K. K ended up getting laser tag pretty often. He kinda sucked at his other duties and laser tag wasn't a hard job, so we stuck him in there on busy days. He was from a more rural area of the South and in Florida for college, and was working at the arcade until he could finish up and had plans of joining the Air Force. The dude was religious and we'd always have half-serious debates with each other when we weren't taking games. It was all in good nature, mind you, but we were both serious about our ideologies. He always prominently wore his crucifix. I found it odd one day when I came in to talk about a new patch on World of Warcraft with him and saw that he didn't have the crucifix on. I had joked with him and asked if he had finally come around to logic and reason. He told me no, that he had just found a more important place for it. I didn't question it. Religious people always came off a bit nutty to me, so I figured it was just a quirk of his and let it be. That day we were super dead and our labor cost was already over our profit, so the manager on duty had me cut 2 people. When I came to doing that, I always checked to see who needed the hours the most, who was coming close to overtime, etc. A was on the arcade floor, just doing cleaning work and close to overtime, so I had her go home. The others on duty really needed the money, and so Kay offered to head home, saying that the job was just for spending money. He didn't need it as much as them. The dude was a pretty good guy, gotta hand it to him. So I let Kay get out of there and I took the next call for laser tag. Everything went well. No spooky shadows, no ghost girls, no weird incidents. It wasn't until light, when we were closing down, that I had the feeling I was being watched all over again. At that point, I was starting to get used to it. I even had a habit of somewhat jokingly saying, "Knock, knock, I'm coming in to clean up. No haunting right now, all right?" So I just ignored it and started heading out. Something caught my eye as I was leaving the room. Not the usual shadowy movement, but a little shimmer of gold. It was coming from the handle of the case the fire extinguisher sat in, so I made my way over to investigate. Hanging from the handle via a lark's head knot with its own chain was a small golden crucifix. Specifically, Kay's crucifix. So the next shift, I worked with him. I asked him what was up. As far as I had known, no one mentioned the creepy shit to him. He goes on to tell me that he had been getting creepy vibes in there for a few days, but it wasn't until the first time he had to close it up that he saw something that made him real uneasy. He told me how he was in the middle of the room sweeping up trash when he could have sworn he saw something crawling across the walls like a lizard, but the size of a Jack Russell. He said he only saw it for a moment and then it was gone. He told me it wasn't the strobes because he had shut them, and the black lights were also off, and it just had the normal lights on. He told me he saw it 4 different times before he decided the place was haunted and needed the love of Jesus. There's only one time on record that anything physical ever happened. To this day, I still find it hard to chalk it up to coincidence, but I don't know what else it could be. Everything to this point could be explained away by tricks of lighting, stress, being tired, paranoia, etc. This one event still gives me goosebumps when I think about it, even though it was practically nothing. On Saturday nights, we would get rowdy guests, drunks, people that refused to leave after their game cards were out of credit, and because of that, we had county police act as security after dark. When we would go to close, a police officer would sweep the area with us. When we closed, we couldn't leave until all departments got their stuff done and got manager approval, so we'd often shoot the shit with the cops that do security. This particular night, we had a cop we knew believed in ghosts, and Kay and I thought it would be great to pull a prank on the guy. We had told him about some of the shit that went down in the arcade, and he'd tell us shit that he had experienced on the job, and we decided to use that to our advantage. As he went to sweep laser tag, Kay and I took a few tokens and snuck inside. We each tossed 2 of them in random spots, then snuck back to the door to wait for him. He comes up and hands us 3 tokens and says, "Ha ha, nice one guys, good try." As he's walking away from us, from down in the middle lane, a single token comes rolling out and hits Kay's shoe. Kay never came back to work after that, citing to management that schoolwork was becoming too demanding for him to keep up with it and a job. Before I got the mixed duty of tech and supervisor, I used to do overnights. Overnights were shifts where the head of the tech department, we'll call him C, would come in after close with a few other techs, usually a senior tech and 1 or 2 entry-level techs, to do extensive repairs that would be too hard with the arcade open. New game installations, reorganization of the arcade floor, inventory, and other tasks. Typically, they'd be done in the middle of the week from around 10 p.m. to 6 or 7 a.m. Aside from the security guard that patrolled the area, it was a warehouse district, and he'd check all the areas around every hour. Coming to do door checks, the techs were alone with C all night, with the doors locked. The only exception would be to go outside to smoke, which was done right outside the only door they unlocked, altogether. That sets the framework for this event. It was right before winter break, and we had received 2 new racing games that had come in a series of large wooden shipping crates. C had called in his friend and long-term senior tech S, myself, and another entry-level tech R, and at the start of the night gave us a rundown of what we'd be doing. He and S were going to begin assembling the first 2 of the new games, and he wanted R and myself to make room in the racing game island by taking 2 of the older games and moving them to another section of the arcade that he had marked on the floor plan. Once he gave us our tasks, he didn't care how we got it done, so long as it was done by when he wanted. This gave us a chance to get the music system in the arcade set up. We all had similar taste in music, so R went to the main control room where the local servers, networking stuff, lighting, and music controls were, and found the right satellite music channel. I went to the concessions area and got us all ices and snacks. C and S went outside for their first smoke of the night. 10 minutes later, we were all getting to work. R and I shot the shit about games and movies we wanted to see, and about how we were both signing up for the Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve shifts to get the double pay the company offered for them. R and I worked pretty fast. It's not as if the work was anything crazy. I would get on the inside bit of the island and unplug the games and push them out from behind, and he would come in with a forklift and take them away to its new location. Even with all our talking and fucking around, we got it done in about an hour, with a big gap open up for the new games and the promotional displays that go around them. We headed to the area C and S had cleared out to have room to assemble the games and started lending a hand. A few hours later, the first of the games was fully assembled and starting its initial boot up to make sure everything was running fine. Sometimes that first boot can take a while, so we all went to the bathroom, got new drinks, and headed outside for CNS to have another smoke. We saw the security guy, who bummed the smoke off S and was talking about his other job with C, since they had worked in the same field at one point. We fucked around outside for about half an hour before the security guy had to head out to do the checks on the buildings around. We went inside, and with the four of us, we banged out the second game a lot faster than the first, with a big part of it being that we knew where everything went without needing the instructions this time around. C and S headed to C's office in the very back of the arcade to fill out paperwork they needed to get done before the week was up, while R and I got the new games into position with the forklift. We got them hooked up, changed the settings, installed the game credit readers, and played a few games to make sure everything was working correctly. When it was, we decided we were going to go hit the snack bar again, then get some of our weekly tech work done early. Each week we'd have to do preventative maintenance, work on a section of the arcade, calibrate gun games, etc. We started in the back of the arcade and began working our way forward when suddenly the satellite radio just cut mid-song. We go from hearing the angry tones of Phil Anselmo over thrash metal guitars to just silence. A few seconds later, we heard the rushing of a ton of water. R and I thought that a pipe burst or something. We booked it over to the bathrooms to make sure, considering all our outlets were in the floor. If a rush of water was going to be coming, we'd have to flip the breakers and soon, or risk frying out possibly millions of dollars worth of games. As we approached the bathroom, we see that the lights, which did not have a switch and were a motion sensor, were on in both the men and women's bathroom. The sound was a lot louder there, and we went in to check. Every single toilet was flushing and not stopping. I radioed C and asked him what we should do about it. We were techs, not maintenance men. We didn't work on the toilets. Just as he got done calling C, we heard S really nervous sounding over the radio saying that as he was in the snack bar area getting their drinks, all the sinks just started full force blasting water and would not shut off regardless of what he did with the knobs. Now, I want to make something clear. I am 6 foot, 1 inch tall, and a big guy. I look intimidating in general. With the exception of some stuff spooking me a bit, I'm usually not very easily scared. I've worked security, I've remained calm while I've had guns pointed at my head. But this shit spooked me. But it wasn't just me. The entire crew was similar big, with the exception of C, who was short but tough as nails. All atheists, typically skeptics on everything, tough guys. We were all spooked. For us to be weirded out, this had to be something, you know. So C tells us to meet him out behind the kitchen, to grab our shit and meet him by the main water valve. We all got out there and shut the shit off. He looked at us all dead in the face and says that right before the water started going crazy, he could swear he saw someone peeking into his office and heard giggling. He told us that he assumed it was one of us pulling a prank on him, even with the toilets, until he heard S get freaked out. He had known S 10 years and had never heard him so much as cry out suddenly, even when his foot got caught in a scissor lift and he had to go to the hospital. That's what let him know that we were just fucking done for the night. We didn't even bother to clock out. C told us he would do a manager override the next day, but that we were getting the fuck out of there for the night. So, around the time K was hired, we got another employee. I'm going to call him T. First initial of his last name, since his first name started with an A and I don't want him being confused with the girl from the laser tag stories. T was a young black guy, maybe about 17 or 18. He had tattoos all over his arms and chest, dressed like a total thug when he wasn't on the clock, and listened to lots of local underground gangster rap. The thing that surprised everyone was just how soft-spoken, intelligent, and polite he was. He was a hard worker, too. You'd set him to a task, and it would be done perfectly and sooner than expected. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it would be about news events, college coursework, and occasionally games. One day, he came to me asking if we were going to be hiring for the summer rush because he's got a family member that is going through some hard times and could really use a job to help them get on their feet. I told him C had mentioned wanting to get a few new people and that he should bring them in for an application, that if they worked anything like he did, we'd be crazy not to have them. Spring break rolls around and C hires on a new set of attendants, including T's relative, whom we discovered was a cousin and female. Suddenly, a bunch of the male staff decides that they're trying to get in good with her. Let's just say that didn't last for long. G was an odd girl from the start. That kind of super cheery and upbeat all the time, no matter what kind of way. Like a stereotypical white suburban 1950s housewife. She would always, in a super high-pitched, happy tone, come up to people at the start of a shift, shriek, "Hello!" and hug them. For the first 3 weeks, she assumed she was just really an upbeat person, and that the problem T had mentioned were either overstated or that she was just very good at masking them in public. About a month after she started working there, though, she started to get weirder, borderline creepy. G would walk pretty quietly, stand in a doorway and just watch people until they noticed her. She let out her shrill "Hi!" with a smile, then wave and walk off. We gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she wanted to be social but didn't want to interrupt anything. C started calling her creepy in conversation because she had done it up to him like 4 times on one shift. But, I mean, some people are just weirdos, right? Nothing innately wrong with that. Well, that's what we thought for a while. One of the supervisors who had been demoted to inventory control for the prize games and redemption counter was there on a slow night, counting inventory and restocking the prize games. He was back in the prize lockup area when he could swear he was being watched. Most of the longtime staff had gotten used to that being a fact of working there, what with the supposed ghost girl and all the other spooky shit that our minds seemed to cause us to feel and see. He just put it behind him and continued to do inventory. A few minutes later, he thought he saw someone standing in the doorway out of the corner of his eye, turned, and saw no one there. Now 5 minutes later, he thought he could hear breathing in the room with him. So he turns around, and what does he see? Fucking G sitting on a box about 4 feet behind him, watching him with a dead-eye expression. He said he was freaked out, but expected her to pull the usual upbeat "Hi!" and run off. She didn't. She just sat there watching him for a few minutes, got up, and waked out. G would often just up and disappear. We wouldn't be able to find her for up to an hour at times. I was doing my mixed-duty tech supervisor position at this time and would have to threaten her with write-ups. Even now, with how creepy she was, she did do good work and was always pleasant with the customers, so I didn't want to write her up, especially with a 3-strike policy in place. We'd ask him where she'd go, why she didn't answer her radio, etc. She'd give non-committal answers and say she'd not do it again. I decided to talk to T about things and see if he had anything he could tell me that put things into perspective. He dropped some shit on me, for sure. G had apparently been living with her older brother and his wife. He didn't give many details on why, but she wasn't with the parents. She had apparently always been weird like this, like she kind of snapped recently. Her brother had killed his pregnant wife by stabbing her in the stomach multiple times after finding out she had been cheating on him. He was sent to prison after pleading no contest. This apparently fucked G up worse than before, and was why she needed a job so bad. T had apparently not spent a whole lot of time with her as a child, though, and said she even gave him the creeps sometimes, but the family looked out for family. Knowing this, and being a family-oriented man myself, I decided to cut her as much slack as I could. It was a fucked-up situation, and the girl had to be going through a lot. I told everyone who shared shifts with her for the next week the short version about how she was going through some serious stress and emotional stuff, and that we shouldn't really judge her on what she was doing recently. That it had to be hard to cope with that kind of stuff. Everyone was understanding, and things went much the same for a while, just being easier to deal with knowing why she was like that. When I told C, he even told me as long as she was getting her work done and not doing it when we had a lot of customers around, to let her take the time she needed, that she was probably vanishing to get herself under control and trying not to let her life impact her work. Well, That was all fine and good until she started vanishing for much longer periods and acting even weirder. We started finding weird drawings on shifts she had worked. They'd be behind games, in stalls of the women's bathroom, at the computer desk and laser tag, etc. They'd be shit you expect from the stereotypical kid possessed by demons movie, all sketchy, shitty quality and of strange things. One of the most notable was done in colored pencil and was of a green hill with 3 figures, a tall black figure with horns, and 2 red figures on their knees in a praying position. Something that looked kind of like a fish, or something was in the air with a word bubble that said, in perfectly feminine handwriting, "There is no joy." Another had been of what looked to be a bear circled by little stick figure girls, with the same handwriting saying, "Screams inside." One of the girls on staff recognized the handwriting. G would often do homework when she would be stationed at laser tag, as she was doing community college. She had left a notebook in the room one time, and this staff member had flipped through it, looking for a name. She was 100% sure it was the same handwriting. So, let's recap. We have a creepy girl stalking people around the arcade, going from super cheery to basically a zombie, who's had a crazy event just happen, leaving drawings you'd expect to see fucking Damien Thorne to be plastering all over his room, disappearing for sometimes hours at a time with nowhere to be found. Soon after finding the drawings, we were on a busy Saturday shift on a day that did not seem like it would fucking end. Around 5 p.m. that day, we had a big-time issue with the laser tag system and had to close it down until one of the techs from the company that made it could come out and look at it. We shut down the systems, turned off the lights, and went about doing our usual busy Saturday shift. Around 8 p.m., I realized I hadn't seen G in a while and started asking around for where she could be. Calling for a position on the radio, asking staff, even checking the security footage to see if I could find out where she was at. No one knew. Around 8:30, A came back from break and I asked her. She told me that she had seen G go into laser tag around 5:15. She figured to go grab her homework she had left behind. Hadn't seen her since. So, I'm a bit irritated, but also a bit spooked. I grab T and R and tell them we need to go check something laser tag, that a customer told me they had seen a kid go in there, and I wanted them to sweep the room with me. So we head in, turn on the lights, and start looking round. R lets out a surprised gasp. He had gotten to the back corner, almost to the wall. Hiding between some of the plastic barriers, he found G sitting on the floor cross-legged, sketching away. Fucking keep in mind, when the strobes, black lights, and normal lights are off, laser tag is pitch black. There is glow-in-the-dark paint on the walls, but it is super old and does not hold its glow very long. Maybe 30 minutes after the lights cut. She was in the fucking dark, sitting in the back of the laser arena, drawing. So we get out of there and R is like, "Fuck this, I need a smoke," and leaves to go on a break. T is asking G what the hell she was doing in there alone in the dark. She goes and says that she was drawing with a friend. I asked, "What friend?" "We found you in there alone." She fucking looks at me like I'm straight up retarded and says, "The girl everyone always talks about," and just straight up doesn't say anything else about it. After that point, the other supervisor and myself stopped being lenient with our write-ups and made sure to get her those 3 strikes. So, on another overnight, this time with C, S, and myself, we were rearranging the arcade. Every peak season, winter break, spring break, summer break, and the key tourist weeks, we would rearrange the arcade, moving high-value games together in more flashy orientations, cycling older games to the lesser traffic areas, putting up new promotional displays and such. The process for this was we'd meet C at the start of the night. He'd show us the floor plan, which games were being moved where, and we start by unplugging them, pushing them out of the islands, and then getting them with a forklift. C went into the office to do some paperwork. Meanwhile, S and I got to work by unplugging every game to be moved, tying its cord to the game with a zip tie and pushing it out. It took us a few hours to get them all ready, considering how many were being moved. C came out and we grabbed drinks and snacks, then went outside for the 2 of them to do a smoke break while I called my girlfriend at the time. When we came back inside, we went to get the forklift and start to move the games around with C's help. One of the game islands, the one we had just finished, was all pushed back where they originally were. They were all plugged in and all on. This disturbed us. Part of closing duties was to cut all the breakers for the arcade games, leaving only the lighting systems and stuff for the kitchen and server rooms up. We double-checked this shit before we started. Not only were all the games back and plugged in, they were all on. Someone had to have had a manager's key set, gone in, turned on just that island's breakers, moved everything in place, plugged it in, and done it all in the 30 minutes that we were outside. S just stood there with his mouth wide open, both of us with a look of disbelief on our faces. He let out the words we were both thinking. Impossible. And we just stood there dumbfounded. C looked at us both, told us to quit fucking around with him, that if we were trying to pull one over on him after that last time, he'd fire us for being assholes. We swore up and down that we didn't do it. We even said we should go check the security footage. C had an "I'm so fucking done with this shit" look on his face, and took us all to the manager's office to review the security footage. We found the footage for that section of the arcade, and we fast-forwarded through, showing us working our asses off, pushing big-ass, heavy games out of the way, unplugging them, taking piss breaks. When it came to that island, it showed us snaking our way behind the games to start unplugging them. There was a blank bit that showed just the arcade with the game still in position. Then us walking back inside like we never pushed them out. C was still convinced we were fucking with him because, hell, it is impossible for 20 heavy-ass games to just move themselves back in place, plug themselves back in, and start themselves up. I can't tell you what the fuck happened there. A few years after I quit this job, I started working another arcade gig for a competing company, and S was working for them as well. I brought up the impossible night to him, and he still had no idea what happened. One of the things we came up with was that C had been fucking with us, that he had to have had another group of guys in there who did it just to get a raise out of us. The big reason we thought that was that the night of toilets resulted in him getting us the fuck out of there, while this night he insisted we stayed the rest of the night and finished the job. We didn't have any of the usual strange shadowy shit, none of the feeling of being watched, just that one impossible event. So, sometime not too long before I quit, unrelated to any of this shit, I had been offered a better paying job, but had to take it on the spot or I'd miss out, as I needed to fill the spot as soon as possible. I was closing basically by myself. Wednesdays were our slowest days, there were no promotions, school was in session, and it was a beautiful night by Florida standards, so anyone not working would be out enjoying the weather and our outdoor offerings. There were 3 people there, the closing manager, myself, and T. We were in cleaning mode, just getting all the games cleaned on the outside, cleaning off displays, cleaning windows, and our big window doors. About the time we were getting ready to close, I sent T to start shutting down the attractions, the laser tag, the rock wall, etc., while I finished up the doors leading out to the mini golf area and the redemption counter. We used Suzo Hap PlexiClean for just about everything. I'd give a light foam on the surface for a few seconds before becoming runny. When you wiped away the runny wet mess, it pulled away all dirt, dust, oily fingerprints, etc. Shit is great for that industry. Common practice was to spray an X of the stuff on one surface, move to the next, spray an X on it, then wipe down the first surface as the foam would just be dying down by then. And that's what I did. Cleaned the inside and out of the mini golf door. Shit was spotless, like an OCD sufferer's toilet bowl. I got finished with the door and counter and joined T in shutting down the rest of the arcade. We were talking together, walking over to the snack bar to grab ices on the way out and pass through the redemption corner and the area where they had the mini golf door. T laughed and said, "You got lazy, man," and nodded his head at the door. I opened my mouth to start responding, to tell him that I had just finished doing it, but cut myself off. All over the door, at about my waist level, were dozens of little handprints. Just fucking dozens of them.